Breaking news, media outlet Newsday is reporting that Suffolk County DA Ray Tierney confirmed that Huerman will return to court at 9:30 a.m. Thursday, that's tomorrow, and that he will be joined by additional law enforcement for a press briefing at 11 a.m.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Well, I know what you're thinking. The case against the Long Island serial killer suspect is stronger than ever, with 2 more potential victims added to the roster. I think it's the opposite. The fact that it's taken so long to add the 4th, 5th, and 6th victims, I think, shows just how weak the case is. I'm sure there is evidence, but it doesn't help if it's a hair here, a fiber there, and a partial DNA profile somewhere else. Someone asked me, well, if they've got DNA, isn't that enough? Well, DNA in isolation is never going to be enough. It needs to be a mosaic. Now, what law enforcement really need is a strong fabric of evidence connecting Huerman even to a single victim. And so no matter how high the body count, if they can't prove Huerman's connections to any one of them, well, then they can't prove their case. Before we get to the rest of this analysis, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. Now, that being the case, never say never. Scott Peterson was convicted on the strength of a single hair in a needle-nose pliers found in his boat. So you do have cases that can turn on kind of a single bit of evidence, which basically is kind of seen as the smoking gun. Of course, in that case, there was a huge amount of circumstantial evidence and Scott Peterson just not behaving like a loving husband. So if prosecutors can paint a convincing psychological portrait complete with twisted search histories, etc., it may be sufficient for a jury to fill in the blanks. But will the state be able to meet their burden of reasonable doubt? Well, let's take a look at the new evidence. According to the New York Post, quote, the hulking Manhattan architect turned murder suspect will be arraigned on an indictment in the 2003 death of Jessica Taylor and the 1993 slaying of Sandra Costello. Now, what concerns me are the dates of these 2 additional murder charges. They're 10 years apart. It's not as though they kind of close to each other. Their bodies, I think, were found relatively close to one another, but the murders itself separated by around a decade, and also nowhere near the timelines of the Gilgo 4, which occurred on and between July 2007, that's Maureen Brainerd Barnes, July 2009, Melissa Bartholomew, June 2010, and Megan Waterman, September 2010, so that's the same year, Amber Lynn Costello, respectively. Jessica Taylor disappeared in July 2003, predating the Gilgo 4 by 4 years, but certainly occurring at the right time of the year, so to speak, midsummer. And also, crucially, Taylor plied the fabric close to where Huerman worked in Manhattan. She apparently worked around the Port Authority bus terminal, which is really very much within the fabric of Fifth Avenue, the Empire State Building, the Long Island Railroad terminal as well. Plastic sheeting was found underneath her torso, and a tattoo on her body had been mutilated with a sharp instrument. Is the sheeting analogous to burlap found with the other remains? Well, I'm not sure it is, but one could imagine someone in the construction industry thinking about containing the evidence. One must also wonder whether this sheeting is the kind of plastic sheeting associated with building supplies, or is it something else? So that needs to be identified. Going back to the article, the remains of Taylor, a 20-year-old woman working as an escort in New York City, were found in a wooded area in Manorville on July 26, 2003. Her additional remains, initially labeled Jane Doe number 5, were discovered on March 29, 2011, along Ocean Parkway. Now, and that's where a lot of the other Gilgo Beach victims were found as well. Now, if Jessica Taylor makes sense as one of the Long Island serial killer's potential first or earlier victims, Sandra Costello is more dubious. She's the second woman to be charged in terms of these additional charges. Costello, not to be confused with Amber Lynn Costello, disappeared in November 1993. Heuermann and his first wife, Elizabeth Ryan, married in 1990 and divorced soon after, which puts Costello into that part of the timeline. Heuermann married Asa Ellerup 3 years after Costello's murder, and then there was a long quiet period until the 10-year anniversary in 2003 when Taylor died. Costello actually complicates everything because for a long time she was thought to be the victim of another multiple murderer in the area, John Buttrolf. Now, for my part, this is just my opinion, she doesn't look like Heuermann's other victim. She's also slightly older, 27, 28 years, where many of the others were low to mid-20s. And she was killed in the winter of 93, whereas most of the other victims were killed in midsummer. Costello is also from Queens. Was Heuermann ever based there? Does his fabric ever take us into that particular area? Well, it's unclear. Was Costello a sex worker? It's unclear, but according to law enforcement, her lifestyle was, quote-unquote, substantially similar. The problem for the prosecution, if you add Costello to the mix, well, you also kind of drag Buttrolf into that as well, which opens the door to another killer in the area, which then raises reasonable doubt. The fact that the cops returned to the Heuermann home, and I think this is the most important part, the most important insight, if you will, many months after their original search in July 2023. I mean, they've been there now up until almost June 2024 in this last search. I mean, that's 10, 11 months, almost a year later, also exposes them to criticism of a clumsy or incomplete initial search, which is never a good look. I'm not going to take it further than that. I am going to deal with the Amanda Knox charges, reconviction essentially of Amanda Knox. I'm going to give you just really my take on that, just based really off the top of my head, what I think about the whole thing. So look out for that. I'll also be doing the next episode in the series on self-esteem. I've been getting really positive feedback on that. So if you haven't watched the first episode, make sure you do. I think you'll find it really worthwhile. Thank you for listening. This is me signing off from Nashville. I'll see you guys again in Myrtle Beach. Take care. See you guys next time.